The rain was falling heavily. It was like driving through a thick curtain of water. He eased off the accelerator a little. Had to be careful driving on wild nights like these. The last thing you'd want is to have an accident or breakdown. You just want to be at home on these stormy nights. The thwack-thwack of the windscreen wipers was hypnotic. He stared out into the glow of the headlights. The rain sounded like white noise interference as it battered the car. He was reminded of the opening scenes of a Hitchcock film. Through the wash of the rain, he spotted a figure at the side of the road. The person wore a green parka and had their thumb jerked out. Why on earth would anyone be hitchhiking tonight? Surely you would just stay put until the morning. They must have been in a rush to get where they were going. He signaled down and pulled over. The hitchhiker climbed in. He shut the door quickly, glad to be out of the rain. He pulled his hood back and sighed. He was somewhere in his mid-20s and had wild red hair and a thick beard.
Awful night, eh?
The hitchhiker held his gaze for a long moment. Drops of rainwater trickled down his face.
Yes, it is.
The driver pulled out and continued through the storm. The hitcher glanced over his shoulder into the blackness behind them. You okay? The hitcher simply nodded. They drove on in silence for a short while. The BBC radio phone blaring out from the car's speakers filled in for conversation. They listened to the radio and their own thoughts as they moved on.
Where are you headed?
North.
Are you traveling to visit friends?
That's right.
The driver couldn't tell if that was a yes or a no. He adjusted his tie nervously. The hitcher stared at him in his suit and tie. The hitcher seemed scruffy in comparison in his parka and Pink Floyd t-shirt.
Do you work around here?
Yes. I was stuck late at the office. You know how it is.
No, not really.
Again, they drifted into silence. The talk radio show carried on as they drove through the wind and rain. The hitcher shifted in his seat and stared out the windscreen.
No music?
What?
Is there no music we could listen to?
I like the talk radio shows. I'm not really a music fan.
The hitcher's eyes glazed over for a moment. Then he spoke.
I like listening to music. It calms me down.
The driver said nothing. Several miles later, there was a news bulletin on the radio. The reporter tried to remain professional as she read the announcement.
We are getting reports that a patient has escaped from a Manchester psychiatric institution. The man is said to be psychopathic and is said to have a history of violent behavior and murder.
The hitcher jabbed a finger on the button on the radio panel. Tinny pop music blurted out from the speakers. The driver stared at his passenger, his question unasked.
I hate the news. It's so depressing. It brings me down. There is never any good news, is there?
The driver did not reply.
Don't worry. I'm not the killer.
The hitcher fidgeted with his coat.
No. No, of course you aren't. I am. This is a story I do not often tell. I promise sincerely that this has scarred me for life, and although I have looked into psychological explanations for what I heard and natural explanations for what occurred, they remain unsatisfactory. When I was a child, I was scared of the dark. I swore to my mother I heard voices in it. They were not evil, but they were not familiar, and so they scared me. It was not uncommon in the middle of the night for me to wake up and hear whispers, as I would call them. When asking my mom, she figured they were just bumps in the night, in typical kids' nightmare material. I tried to explain to her that it was more than that they sounded different from one another the way people's voices do. On some nights, I would get so scared from these whispers that I would sleep in my mom's bed with her. It was an added bonus that the bathroom was directly outside of her bedroom door for my late-night tinkles. I should add at this point that when walking out into the hall to go to the bathroom, you look directly down the stairs that would lead you into my living room on the first floor, as my mom's bedroom was on the second floor. On one such night, around Christmas, I awoke and felt the need to relieve myself. I walked out from the door and distinctly heard the phrase, "Look." And to my astonishment, a red light, almost like a spotlight, was cast upon the wall at the very bottom of the stairs. The light had no other source. It was by itself, and I was transfixed by it. Being a little kid, and it only being a few days from Christmas, I knew what this light was. It was Santa. How else could he get into my house to know I was being a good boy? I was so excited that I began walking down the stairs to greet him, picking up my pace after the second step as it began to creep off the wall and fade into the darkness in my living room. That's when I heard him. A very strong, masculine voice, different from the first. Not at all like my father's. Not to say he isn't masculine, it was just distinctly different. It said,
Stop right now. Go back up those stairs.
I listened, turned around, and what happened next, I am not sure I would believe if someone had told me this same story. After reaching the top of the stairs, I heard a very loud crash that sent me running back to my mother's bed, where I jumped straight under the covers and stayed there the whole night. When we awoke the next morning, the poinsettia lights, little Christmas flower lights that glowed red, my mother had put on the railing, were pulled straight down to the bottom of the stairs, some broken from what seemed like a forceful tear, laying in a single pile. The dry sink in my living room had fallen from the wall. My mother could not explain it. My father was worried we had been the victims of a home invasion. My sister was crying. There was nothing missing. Nobody had broken in. There did not seem to be any reason this had happened. And then I saw it, and I kept quiet about it because I was so afraid that I could not force words out of my mouth. There, on the edge of the wooden dry sink, which had been facing up, were 3 indentations where the finish on the wood had been worn, almost as if in a forceful grip. Something down there had grabbed it and threw it down. That was what the bang was. I was mortified. After that day, I never heard a single voice again. I do not like to imagine what was waiting downstairs for me that night, if it was anything at all. But I can tell you that the reality was that something had physically acted upon 2 things in my house near the bottom of that stairwell. After this, I had never heard another whisper again, which is sad because in some ways I would have liked to thank the man that had stopped me from going down those stairs. This happened when I was 7. I am 20 years old now, and because of this incident, I am still afraid of the dark, especially shadowy stairwells.